The pregnancy test landed in the restaurant's koi pond with barely a splash. I watched it sink between the ornamental fish, joining the coins people had tossed in while making wishes. 3 years ago, I'd thrown a penny in there myself, wishing for a life with Dylan Reeves. Now I was watching evidence of that life disappear into cloudy water while his new fiancé laughed at something he whispered in her ear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. They hadn't seen me yet. I was standing behind a decorative bamboo screen, clutching my purse so tight my knuckles had gone white. The hostess had seated them at what used to be our table, the corner booth by the window where Dylan had once promised me forever. Ma'am? The hostess touched my elbow gently. Your table is ready. Would you still like to sit in the main dining area? Or would you prefer? Here is fine. I cut her off, moving to a small table that gave me a perfect view of Dylan and his new woman. Right here is perfect. The hostess hesitated, clearly sensing something was wrong, but she set down my menu and retreated. Smart girl. I ordered water and opened my phone, pulling up the folder I hadn't looked at in 8 months. The folder labeled, Hospital Records, Do Not Open. My finger hovered over it, trembling. Through the bamboo screen, I could hear Dylan's distinctive laugh, the one that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my stomach turn. 8 months ago, that laugh had been the last thing I heard before the clinic door closed behind me. I can't do this, Vic, he'd said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. Victoria was too formal, too cold for the man I'd loved since college. A baby would ruin everything. You know that, right? We talked about this. Career first, family later. You promised. I had promised. Back when, later, seemed like a reasonable time frame. Back when I believed that Dylan's ambition was about building a future for us, not just for himself. But Dylan, we're engaged. We could. Could what? Play house while I'm trying to make partner at the firm? While you're barely keeping your gallery afloat? His voice had been so cold that day, standing in the parking lot of the clinic he'd researched and booked without asking if I wanted other options. Be realistic, Victoria. This is the only choice that makes sense. The only choice. I'd gone inside alone. He'd said he had a meeting he couldn't miss. But I later found out he'd spent that afternoon playing golf with the senior partners. His phone had been off when I called afterward, bleeding and crying in my apartment. It stayed off for 3 days. When he finally showed up, he'd brought roses. Pink ones, my least favorite. He'd never bothered to remember I preferred wildflowers. Hey, you okay? He'd been so casual, like I'd just had a dental cleaning instead of losing the future I'd started to imagine. I figured we could grab dinner. Maybe catch that movie you wanted to see? That's when I knew. That's when I really understood that to Dylan Reeves, I had never been a partner. I'd been an accessory, a placeholder, something comfortable to have around until something better came along. I'd ended it that night. Threw his ring at him, a modest half-carat that he'd spent more time apologizing for than being proud of, and told him to leave. He'd seemed almost relieved. The water arrived, and I took a long sip, my eyes never leaving Dylan's table. The woman with him was beautiful in that effortless way that money provides perfect highlights, designer dress, jewelry that caught the light with every movement. She wore an engagement ring that looked like it cost more than my car. They'd been engaged for 4 months. I knew because Dylan's mother, Patricia, still sent me Christmas cards and birthday wishes. She'd always liked me more than Dylan did. In her last message, she'd written, I don't understand what happened between you two, but I want you to know you'll always be like a daughter to me. Dylan seems happy with Isabel, though I worry he's rushing into things. She's lovely, but there's something calculated about her. Not warm like you. Patricia didn't know about the baby, about the choice that hadn't really been a choice. Dylan had made me promise not to tell anyone, especially not his mother. She wouldn't understand, he'd said. You know how traditional she is. Traditional enough to have sent me a dozen handwritten recipes when Dylan and I got engaged, each one a family treasure she wanted to pass down. Traditional enough to have started knitting baby blankets the moment we announced our engagement, telling me she couldn't wait to be a grandmother. Those blankets were still in my closet, wrapped in tissue paper, smelling like cedar and broken promises. Excuse me, miss, my waiter appeared, interrupting my thoughts. Have you decided on the salmon? I said without looking at the menu. It's what I always ordered here, what Dylan used to tease me about, calling me predictable, and a glass of your most expensive red wine. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Across the room, Dylan was holding Isabel's hand across the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a gesture I recognized intimately. He'd done that to me once, back when I thought his touches meant something. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Rachel. "Are you sure about this? There are other ways to move on, healthier ways." I typed back. "I'm not trying to move on. I'm trying to make him remember." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Rachel knew better than to argue with me when I'd made up my mind. She'd been the one holding my hand in the recovery room while Dylan was teeing off on the 7th hole. She'd been the one who'd had to physically restrain me from driving to his office and exposing him to his entire firm. "Wait," she'd said, gripping my shoulders while I sobbed. "If you're going to burn his world down, do it right. Make it count. Make it hurt." So I'd waited, grieved, planned. And now, watching him play the devoted fiancé to another woman, I knew the time had finally come. The wine arrived, a 2015 Bordeaux that cost $90 a glass. I took a sip, savoring the rich complexity, and pulled up my email. The message I'd drafted was already there, waiting. All it needed was one tap to send, but not yet. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I wanted to watch him a little longer. Wanted to memorize the way he looked right now, confident, successful, completely unaware that his perfect little world was about to crack open like an egg. The restaurant was filling up now. The Friday evening crowd arriving in waves of expensive perfume and tailored suits. This place, Sakura Garden, was where Seattle's elite came to see and be seen. The waiting list for reservations was typically 2 months long, but I'd called in a favor from the owner, Kenneth Tanaka, whose art collection I'd helped him acquire over the years. "For you, Victoria. Anything," he'd said when I called this morning. "But may I ask why you need a table for tonight specifically? You sound different." "I am different, Ken," I'd replied, watching my reflection in my bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at me had lost 15 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Her eyes had a hardness that hadn't been there a year ago. I'm finally putting something to rest. Now, sitting here with my expensive wine and my folder of hospital records, I felt something close to peace. Not the warm, comfortable peace of resolution, but the cold, sharp peace of certainty. Dylan's phone rang. I watched him glance at the screen, say something to Isabel, and step away from the table to take the call. He walked right past my bamboo screen, so close I could smell his cologne, the same Tom Ford scent I'd bought him for his 30th birthday. "I know, Mom, but we've been over this," he was saying into his phone, his voice carrying that edge of impatience he used when dealing with anyone he considered beneath him. "Isabel wants a winter wedding. December 17th. It's already booked." A pause. "No, I haven't told Victoria." "Why would I? We broke up almost a year ago. She's probably moved on by now." He laughed. That dismissive sound I'd heard so many times. "Trust me, she's fine. Victoria's always been resilient. She'll land on her feet." Resilient, as if surviving what he'd put me through was some kind of personality quirk rather than a desperate act of self-preservation. He returned to his table, and Isabel immediately leaned in, concern on her perfect face. I could read her lips from here. "Everything okay?" Dylan waved dismissively, the same gesture he'd used on me 1,000 times. "Just my mom being sentimental. You know how mothers are." "No, Isabel," I thought. "You don't know how his mother is. You don't know about the handwritten recipes or the baby blankets or the woman who cried when we broke up because she was losing the daughter she'd always wanted." My salmon arrived, plated like art, but I barely tasted it. I was too focused on timing, on waiting for the precise moment when Dylan would be at his most comfortable, his most unguarded. That moment came during dessert. I watched as the waiter presented them with an elaborate chocolate creation, complete with sparklers and a small banner that read, "Congratulations." They must have told the restaurant they were celebrating something. The engagement, probably, even though that had been months ago. Dylan always loved being the center of attention. The surrounding tables applauded politely. Dylan stood, pulling Isabel to her feet for a kiss that seemed more performative than passionate. He was playing to the crowd, soaking in their approval. Perfect. I picked up my phone and hit send on the email. Then I stood, smoothed down my dress, the blue one Dylan had once said made my eyes look too intense, and walked toward their table. "Dylan," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a knife through silk. He turned, his face cycling through shock, confusion, and finally settling on panic. Victoria. What are you? Congratulations on your engagement, I said, smiling at Isabel, who was looking between us with growing alarm. I'm Victoria Chen, by the way, Dylan's ex-fiancé. Chen? Dylan's face had gone pale. Your name is Montgomery. Victoria Montgomery. Oh, I changed it, I said casually, enjoying his confusion. Legally. About 6 months ago. Fresh start, and all that. You understand. Isabel was looking at Dylan now, questions forming in her eyes. Good. Let her wonder. Let her start to doubt. What do you want, Victoria? Dylan's voice was low, threatening. The voice he used when he wasn't getting his way. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Not the hospital records, not yet. Those were for later, for maximum impact. This envelope contained something else entirely. I wanted to give you a wedding gift, I said, placing it on the table between their half-eaten desserts. Something to remember me by. Dylan stared at the envelope like it might explode. Isabel reached for it, but Dylan grabbed her wrist. Don't. Why not? She asked, and I heard the first hint of suspicion in her voice. What is it? Open it, I encouraged, looking directly at Dylan. Unless you want to tell her yourself? The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Other diners were watching now, sensing drama, pulled in by the tension radiating from our little triangle. Dylan's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. This isn't the place, Victoria. Really? Because this seems like the perfect place to me. After all, you brought your new fiancé to our restaurant, to our table. You ordered our wine. I gestured to the bottle of Pinot Noir on their table, the same wine we used to share. Seems only fitting that I share some memories of our relationship too. Isabel pulled her wrist from Dylan's grip and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Dylan and me on vacation in Maui. Dylan and me at his firm's holiday party. Dylan and me at his mother's birthday dinner, his arm around my waist, his lips on my cheek. But those weren't the interesting ones. The interesting ones were underneath. Photos of Dylan with other women. 3 different women, to be exact. All taken during our engagement. Timestamps visible in the corners. Dates that proved exactly when and where each indiscretion had occurred. Isabel's hands were shaking as she flipped through them. Dylan? Those are fake, he said immediately, but his voice lacked conviction. She's clearly manipulated. Photo number 7, I interrupted. The blonde in the red dress? That's your colleague Amanda from the corporate law division. Photo taken at the Sheraton in Bellevue, March 15th of last year. I know because I was supposed to meet you for dinner that night. But you canceled. Said you were working late on the Stevenson case. Dylan's face had gone from pale to red. You had me followed? No, I said calmly. I trusted you. Right up until I found Amanda's earring in your car. Then I hired someone to confirm what I already suspected. But don't worry, I never used these photos. Until now. Isabel was standing now, the photographs scattered across the table like accusatory confetti. You cheated on her? During your engagement? Baby, I can explain. Don't call me baby. Her voice was ice. She looked at me, and I saw something I recognized in her eyes the moment when love starts its transformation into something else. How many? 3 that I could prove, I said. But honestly, probably more. Dylan has a very particular type, ambitious, beautiful, and conveniently available when his conscience is taking a nap. Dylan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You vindictive bitch. You can't just what? I stepped closer, and he actually flinched. Good. Can't just tell the truth. Can't just show your new fiancé who you really are? Funny, because I remember you being very concerned about truth when you were convincing me to. I stopped myself. Not yet. That revelation needed the right moment, the right audience. You know what? Dylan grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. We're leaving. Isabel. Let's go. But Isabel wasn't moving. She was staring at the photos, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth. When she looked up at Dylan, her eyes were wet. The Sheraton in Bellevue. That's where we had our first date. The silence that followed was exquisite. Isabel, it's not what you think. You took her to our place? Isabel's voice was rising now, drawing even more attention. You took another woman to the hotel where we... It's a hotel! Dylan's desperation was showing. It's not like I invented it. People go there all the time. I watched this unfold with the detached fascination of someone watching a building they'd carefully wired finally begin to collapse. This wasn't even the main event. This was just the opening act. Kenneth Tanaka appeared at my elbow, his expression professionally neutral, despite the scene unfolding in his restaurant. "Miss Chen, is everything all right?" "Perfect, Ken. Thank you." I smiled at him, then turned back to Dylan and Isabel. "I should let you two talk. But Dylan? Check your email. I sent you something you'll want to see before the wedding. Call it a reminder of the promises we made to each other." I walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing there with his crumbling relationship and his scattered lies. Behind me, I heard Isabel's voice, sharp with tears. "Don't you dare walk away from me." "Dylan," I said, "don't walk away." But I didn't stay to watch the rest. I had one more stop to make tonight. Outside, the Seattle evening was crisp and clear, the kind of night that made you remember why you lived in the Pacific Northwest despite the rain. I pulled out my phone and called Rachel. "It's done," I said when she answered. "Phase 1 complete." "And?" I could hear the anxiety in her voice. "How do you feel?" I considered the question honestly. How did I feel? Not satisfied, exactly. Not yet. The satisfaction would come later, when Dylan really understood what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed. "Ask me again tomorrow," I said, after Phase 2. Phase 2 was the email. The one I'd sent to Dylan, but also CC'd to a very specific list of people. His mother Patricia, his managing partner at the law firm, and most importantly, the chair of the ethics committee at the Washington State Bar Association. The email contained everything. The hospital records showing the procedure. The text messages where Dylan had pressured me. The financial records showing he'd paid for it with his firm's credit card, a violation of both ethics and firm policy. And attached to it all, a detailed account of what had happened, written in my own words, holding nothing back. But here's what made it perfect. I'd timed the email to arrive tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., giving Dylan just enough time to see it first, but not enough time to do anything about it. He'd spend all night panicking, trying to figure out how to control the damage, knowing that by sunrise, everyone who mattered would know exactly what kind of man he really was. My phone rang. Dylan's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Then a text. "Victoria, please. We need to talk. Don't send whatever you're planning to send. I'm begging you." Too late, I thought, slipping my phone back into my purse. The email was already scheduled. The detonation was set. I walked to my car, a modest Honda that I'd bought with my own money, unlike the BMW Dylan had given me that turned out to be leased in my name but paid for with money he'd borrowed from his parents. After we broke up, I'd discovered so many little lies like that, small deceptions that revealed the larger truth. Dylan Reeves was a man who took credit for everything and responsibility for nothing. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Texts from Dylan, alternating between begging and threatening. "Please don't do this. Whatever I did, we can fix it. I'll tell everyone you're lying. You're crazy, you know that? Psychotic. I loved you, I really did. This will ruin my career. Please, Victoria, I'm sorry." I turned off my phone and drove home to my apartment, a small one-bedroom in Capitol Hill that I'd moved to after leaving the place Dylan and I had shared. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Paid for with money from my gallery, which was actually doing better than ever since I'd stopped listening to Dylan's advice about mainstream appeal and started following my own instincts. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and sat on my couch, staring at the wall where I'd hung a painting I'd done in art therapy. It showed a woman standing in front of a closed door, her hand on the knob, backlit by light from the other side. My therapist had asked me what was behind the door. "The future," I'd said. "The one I'm not allowed to have." She'd been quiet for a long moment, then said, "Who decided you're not allowed?" That question had changed everything, because the answer was Dylan. Dylan had decided, Dylan had chosen, and I'd let him, but not anymore. I pulled out my laptop and opened a document I'd been working on for months, a detailed account of everything that had happened, written with the clarity that only distance and therapy can provide. It was over 50 pages long, meticulously documented, emotionally raw. Tomorrow, after Dylan's world had properly imploded, I would publish it on Medium under my real name. Not as revenge, exactly, but as testimony. As a warning to other women who might be dating Dylan Reeves or men like him. As proof that staying silent doesn't protect you, it only protects the people who hurt you. The title was simple. The Baby He Made Me Abort. A story about coercion, control, and finding your voice. I scheduled it to publish at noon tomorrow, giving the morning's email enough time to circulate first. Then I went to bed and slept better than I had in 8 months. The next morning, I woke to 47 missed calls and 103 text messages. I made coffee before reading any of them, taking my time, enjoying the ritual. Through my kitchen window, I could see the sun rising over the city, painting everything gold. It felt symbolic somehow. A new day, a new beginning. Finally, I scrolled through my phone. Messages from Dylan, 23 of them, progressively more desperate and angry. Messages from Isabel, 2 of them. Thank you for telling me the truth, and I left him. Messages from numbers I didn't recognize, presumably Dylan's friends and colleagues who'd gotten my number from him. And one message from Patricia Reeves, sent at 6:47 a.m. Victoria. Dear, I just read Dylan's email. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Can we please talk? There are things you should know about my son. Things I should have told you a long time ago. Patricia. I stared at that message for a long time. Patricia wanted to talk. Patricia had things to tell me. I replied, coffee this afternoon? 3 p.m. at Cafe Allegro? Her response came immediately. I'll be there. And Victoria? Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. I failed you. But I won't fail you again. The morning crawled by. I went to my gallery, pretended to work, checked my phone obsessively. At 11:30, I got a call from a number with a 206 area code. Victoria Montgomery? A woman's voice. Professional but kind. Chen. I corrected automatically. Victoria Chen. My apologies, Miss Chen. This is Sarah Walters from the Washington State Bar Association. I'm calling regarding a complaint we received this morning about Dylan Reeves. Would you be willing to provide testimony about the allegations you outlined in your email? My heart was pounding. Yes, I would. Excellent. I'll send you some preliminary paperwork. I should tell you, Miss Chen, that what Mr. Reeves did using firm resources for personal matters, engaging in behavior that reflects poorly on the legal profession, these are serious violations. If substantiated, he could face suspension or even disbarment. After we hung up, I sat very still, processing what had just happened. Dylan's career. The thing he'd valued more than anything, more than me, more than our relationship, more than the baby we might have had, was now in jeopardy. At noon exactly, my Medium article went live. Within 20 minutes, it had 500 views. Within an hour, 2,000. By 2 p.m., it was trending on Twitter with the hashtag number #BelieveWomen and had been shared by several prominent feminist accounts. The comments section filled up quickly. This happened to me too. Thank you for sharing your story. Men like this never face consequences. I hope he gets everything he deserves. My best friend went through something similar. She never recovered. Thank you for speaking up. And then, buried in the supportive comments, I found one that made me stop breathing. I was Dylan Reeves' girlfriend before Victoria. He did the same thing to me. Made me have an abortion. Then dumped me 3 months later. I've been too afraid to say anything because he threatened to ruin my career. Thank you, Victoria, for giving me courage. My name is Emma Patterson, and I'm ready to tell my story too. I screenshotted Emma's comment and immediately sent it to Sarah Walters at the Bar Association. Then I got ready for my meeting with Patricia. Cafe Allegro was crowded with the usual afternoon mix of students and remote workers, but Patricia had secured a quiet table in the back corner. She stood when she saw me, and I was shocked by how much she'd aged in the months since I'd seen her. Her hair had gone almost completely gray, and there were new lines around her eyes. Victoria. She pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than I expected. When she released me, her eyes were wet. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We sat, and she immediately pushed a box across the table toward me. These are yours. The recipes I gave you. The blankets I made. Dylan sent them back to me after you broke up, and I've been saving them, hoping somehow you two would work things out. But now, she opened the box, and there they were, all the items she'd given me during our engagement, lovingly preserved in tissue paper. I can't take these, I said, my voice thick. They were meant for the life Dylan stole from you. Patricia's voice was sharp. angry in a way I'd never heard from her before. Keep them, Victoria. Not as a reminder of him, but as a reminder that you deserved better, that you deserved all of it, the love, the family, the partnership. I touched the edge of one of the baby blankets, soft yellow yarn that she'd spent months perfecting. There's something else, Patricia said, lowering her voice. Something I should have told you when you first started dating Dylan, but I convinced myself he'd changed, that he'd grown out of it. Out of what? She took a deep breath. Dylan wasn't always like this. When he was young, he was kind, sensitive, even gentle. But his father, my ex-husband, he did a number on him. Told him constantly that empathy was weakness, that successful men take what they want and don't apologize for it. She paused, her hands clenching around her coffee cup. I thought when I left his father and raised Dylan mostly on my own, I could undo that damage. But some lessons go too deep. Patricia, you can't blame yourself for. I'm not finished. She looked at me directly, her eyes hard. Before you, there was another girl, Emma. Did you know about her? My pulse quickened. She just commented on my article, said Dylan did the same thing to her. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. I knew. I found out after they broke up. She tried to tell me what happened, but God help me, I didn't believe her. I thought she was just a bitter ex trying to cause trouble for my son. She wiped her eyes angrily. But then he met you. And you were so different from his other girlfriends. Real. Genuine. I thought maybe you'd be the one to change him, to show him what real love looked like. People don't change because of love, I said quietly. They change because they choose to. Dylan never chose to. No, she agreed. He didn't. And now there's Isabel. And God knows how many others before her and after her. There will always be another woman for Dylan to hurt, unless someone stops him. I understood what she was saying, what she was asking. The Bar Association called me this morning, I told her. They're investigating. Patricia leaned forward. Good. But Victoria, you need to know something. Dylan's managing partner, Richard Chen, no relation to you, I assume? I shook my head. Richard is Dylan's godfather. They've been friends since law school. Him and Dylan's father. If you're going up against Dylan professionally, you're going up against Richard too. And Richard Chen is not a man who likes to lose. A chill ran through me. Are you saying I should back down? No. Patricia's voice was fierce. I'm saying you need to be prepared for him to fight dirty. And I'm saying that if you need someone who knows Dylan's secrets, all of them, I'm willing to testify. I stared at her. Why would you do that? He's your son. Because you're not the only one he's hurt. Because Emma Patterson deserves justice too. And because, she paused, her voice breaking, because I helped create this monster. And it's time I helped destroy what I made. We talked for another hour. Patricia told me things about Dylan I'd never known, the pattern of manipulation that went back to high school, the girl he'd gotten pregnant at 19 who'd mysteriously transferred schools afterward, the way he'd learned from his father to separate women into categories, those useful for career advancement, and those useful for everything else. I wanted so badly for you to be different, Patricia said as we prepared to leave. Not different as in better than other women, you were always better than he deserved, but different as in immune to his charm. Strong enough to see through him. I did see through him, I said. Eventually. That's why I'm here. She squeezed my hand. When this is over, when you've done whatever you need to do, please stay in touch. You're still the closest thing I have to a daughter. That doesn't change just because my son is a bastard. I promised I would. And I meant it. Walking back to my car, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Cease and desist. Immediate action required." It was from Dylan's law firm. Specifically, from Richard Chen, Esquire, managing partner. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was exactly what Patricia had warned me about, a threat wrapped in legalese. It demanded I remove my Medium article immediately, cease all communication with current and former employees of the firm, and retract all statements made about Dylan Reeves, or face a defamation lawsuit. At the bottom, in smaller text, Mr. Reeves has suffered severe emotional distress and reputational damage as a result of your false and malicious statements. We are prepared to pursue damages in excess of $500,000. I read it twice, then forwarded it to 3 people. My lawyer. Yes. I'd hired one in preparation for exactly this. Sarah Walters at the Bar Association, and Rachel. Rachel called immediately. They're threatening to sue you for $500,000? They're bluffing. I said, though my voice shook. Everything I wrote is true and documented. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Everything I wrote defense. But even if you win, legal fees could bankrupt you. Victoria, maybe you should. No. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. This is exactly what they're counting on, that I'll be too scared or too broke to fight back. But I'm not backing down. Not this time. After I hung up with Rachel, I called my lawyer, Jennifer Wu. She'd been recommended by Kenneth Tanaka, and in our initial consultation, she'd made it clear she didn't just practice law, she wielded it like a weapon. Let me guess, Jennifer said when she answered. You got a scary letter from Richard Chen. How did you? Because Richard Chen is predictable. He always starts with intimidation, counts on people being too afraid to call his bluff. I could hear the smile in her voice. Forward me everything you have, the cease and desist, your hospital records, the text messages, all of it. I'm going to draft a response that will make him think twice about following through. What kind of response? The kind that points out he's threatening a woman for speaking truthfully about reproductive coercion, which is a crime in Washington state. The kind that mentions how badly that would play in the court of public opinion, especially given the current climate around women's rights. The kind that suggests we'd be happy to countersue for emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional harm, and anything else I can think of. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Men like Dylan Reeves and Richard Chen don't go down without a fight. But Victoria, they picked the wrong woman to mess with this time. That evening, I went home and did something I hadn't done since before the abortion. I painted. Not therapy art this time, but real art, the kind that came from somewhere deep and raw and true. I painted for hours, losing myself in color and movement, letting everything I'd been holding inside pour out onto canvas. When I finally stepped back, exhausted and paint-splattered, I saw what I'd created. A woman made of shattered glass, each piece reflecting a different version of herself, past, present, possible futures. She was broken but somehow more beautiful for it. Light shining through her cracks in ways it never could have when she was whole. I titled it Resilient and hung it in my bedroom where I'd see it every morning. My phone buzzed with a new notification. Emma Patterson had published her own Medium article. Me Too. My experience with Dylan Reeves. I read it with tears streaming down my face. Her story was nearly identical to mine, down to the details, the clinic he'd researched, the insistence on secrecy, the golf outing he'd prioritized over her recovery, the pink roses, her least favorite too. Reading it felt like looking into a mirror that reflected the past. But at the end of her article, Emma had written something that made me stop crying. For years I blamed myself. I thought I should have been stronger, should have said no, should have found a way to keep the baby despite his pressure. But reading Victoria's story made me realize, this wasn't about weakness. This was about a man who was very skilled at manipulation meeting women who were skilled at love. We trusted him because we loved him, and he used that trust as a weapon. That's not our failure. That's his. I shared her article immediately, and within hours, it was trending alongside mine. And then something unexpected happened. A third woman came forward. And a fourth. And a fifth. By midnight, 7 different women had published stories about Dylan Reeves and his pattern of behavior. Not all of them involved pregnancy, but all of them involved coercion, manipulation, and the systematic breaking down of their boundaries until they barely recognized themselves. The hashtag number Dylan Reeves was trending nationwide. My phone rang at 12:30 a.m. A blocked number. I answered anyway. Victoria. Dylan's voice was raw, destroyed. Please. Please make it stop. I've lost everything. Isabel left me. The firm put me on leave. My mother won't speak to me. Please, I'm begging you. Funny, I said quietly. That's almost exactly what I said to you 8 months ago. Please, Dylan. I'm not ready for this. Please, can we talk about options? Please, don't make me do this alone. Do you remember what you told me? Silence. You said, stop being dramatic, Victoria. You'll be fine. You're always fine. Well, Dylan, you'll be fine too. You're always fine. Right? Isn't that what you told everyone when they asked about me after we broke up? I'm sorry. He was crying now. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so fucking wrong about everything. Yes, I agreed. You were, but sorry doesn't undo what you did. Sorry doesn't bring back what you made me lose. Sorry is just a word you're using now, because you're finally facing consequences. What do you want from me? His voice cracked. What will it take to make you stop? I thought about that question. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? For him to hurt the way I'd hurt? I want you to understand, I finally said. I want you to really, truly, understand what you did. Not just to me, but to Emma, and to all those other women. I want you to feel what it's like to have your choices taken away. Your future decided by someone else. Your voice silenced, because the person who was supposed to love you decided their convenience mattered more than your humanity. I understand, he said desperately. I swear I understand now. No, you don't. But maybe someday you will. Until then, Dylan, this is what accountability looks like. Get used to it. I hung up and blocked his number. Then I opened my laptop and added one final post to Medium, not a story this time, but a resource guide for women experiencing reproductive coercion. I listed hotlines, legal resources, counseling services, and support groups. I shared it with every organization I could think of that worked with women's reproductive rights. The title was simple. You don't have to face this alone. Resources for women who need help. Within an hour, it had been shared 10,000 times. I finally went to bed at 2 a.m., exhausted but not tired. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Richard Chen's response to Jennifer's letter. Possibly more articles from more women. Definitely more fallout from Dylan's implosion. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Hope. Not hope that things would go back to the way they were, they wouldn't, and I didn't want them to. But hope that maybe, just maybe, speaking up had been worth it. That maybe the baby I'd lost hadn't been erased entirely, but had instead become something else, a catalyst for change, a reason for other women to find their voices. A proof that silence doesn't protect you but speaking up might protect someone else. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the ultrasound pictures still hidden in my drawer. Tomorrow, I would decide what to do with them. Tomorrow, Phase 3 would begin. The ultrasound pictures lay spread across my kitchen table like tarot cards predicting a future that would never come. 3 images, each showing a different angle of the tiny cluster of cells that had been my baby, our baby. The one Dylan had erased as casually as deleting an email. I'd kept them hidden for 8 months. Unable to look at them but unable to throw them away. Now, in the gray morning light filtering through my apartment windows, I finally understood what I needed to do with them. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Wu. My lawyer. Richard. Chen responded. He's backing down on the defamation threat, but doubling down on harassment claims. They're planning something bigger. Be careful. I set the phone down and picked up the ultrasound dated at 6 weeks. The image was grainy, barely recognizable as human, but I remembered the technician pointing out the heartbeat, a tiny flicker on the screen that had made everything real. Dylan had refused to come to that appointment. Too busy, he'd said. Just text me what they say. I'd texted him a heart emoji. He'd replied, cool. Don't forget we need to schedule the other thing. The other thing. He couldn't even say the word abortion. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Patricia Reeves, holding a coffee carrier and a white bakery bag. I brought breakfast, she said when I opened the door. And information you're going to want to hear. We settled at my kitchen table, and Patricia immediately noticed the ultrasounds. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Victoria, you kept them. I couldn't let go, I admitted. Even after everything, I couldn't just throw away the only proof that my baby existed. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the images. When she looked up, her eyes were fierce. Dylan told me you had a miscarriage. That's what he said when you two broke up, that the stress of wedding planning and your instability caused you to lose the baby naturally. The rage that filled me was so complete, so consuming, that for a moment I couldn't speak. He told you I miscarried. He made me promise not to bring it up to you because you were too fragile to talk about it. Patricia's voice shook with fury. He let me comfort him. Let me tell him it wasn't his fault. Let me grieve for a grandchild that she couldn't finish the sentence. That he killed. I finished for her. That's the word you're looking for. Patricia pulled out her phone. I recorded a conversation with Dylan last night. After all those women came forward, I called him and told him I needed the truth. He was drunk, scared, and I think part of him wanted to confess. She pressed play. Dylan's voice filled my kitchen, slurred and desperate. Mom, you don't understand the pressure I was under. Partnership track is brutal. Having a kid would have derailed everything. Victoria wasn't thinking clearly, she was all emotional about the pregnancy. Talking about keeping it like we could just play house while I'm trying to build a career. I had to make the decision for both of us. She would have thanked me eventually. They all would have. Patricia's voice on the recording. They all? Dylan, how many times have you done this? A long pause, then. Does it matter? I did what needed to be done. I'm not the villain here, Mom. These women are trying to destroy me. Because I made practical choices. Victoria's just bitter because I moved on and she's still alone. The recording ended. Patricia looked at me with tears streaming down her face. I've already sent this to the Bar Association and to your lawyer. But Victoria, I think you should have it too. For whatever you decide to do next. What I decided to do next was call a press conference. Jennifer Wu tried to talk me out of it. Victoria? Going public like this, it's permanent. There's no taking it back. Are you sure you're ready for that level of exposure? I've been ready since the moment Dylan walked away from me at that clinic, I said. I'm done hiding. I'm done protecting him from the consequences of his choices. Rachel was less diplomatic. Are you insane? The internet is going to tear you apart. You know that, right? They're going to blame you for getting pregnant, for not standing up to him, for waiting so long to come forward. They're going to say you're doing this for attention, or money, or revenge. Let them, I replied calmly. I know the truth. The women who've shared their stories know the truth. And most importantly, Dylan knows the truth. That's all that matters. The press conference was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the Washington Women's Legal Center. Emma Patterson agreed to speak alongside me, as did two other women who'd come forward with their stories about Dylan. But first, I had one more move to make. Thursday evening, I drove to the restaurant where this had all begun, Sakura Garden. Kenneth Tanaka had reserved the entire private dining room for me. The same room where corporate Seattle held their most important dinners, their biggest deals, their celebration of success. Tonight, it would host something different. I'd invited 20 people, journalists from the Seattle Times and other major outlets, representatives from women's advocacy organizations, members of the Bar Association Ethics Committee, and most importantly, senior partners from Dylan's law firm, including Richard Chen. They arrived separately, confused by the mysterious invitation that promised information regarding professional misconduct at Chen, Morrison, and Associates. Nobody knew I was behind it. Nobody knew what was coming. I waited until everyone was seated, drinks poured, curiosity building. Then I stepped into the room. Richard Chen stood immediately, his face flushing red. What is this? Miss Montgomery? If you think ambushing us at dinner is going to... Chen, I corrected. My legal name is Victoria Chen now. Please, sit down, Mr. Chen. You're going to want to hear this. I moved to the front of the room where a screen had been set up. On the table beside me, I'd arranged a display. The ultrasound pictures. Printed text messages between Dylan and me. Hospital records. And Patricia's recording device. My name is Victoria Chen, I began. My voice steady despite my racing heart. 8 months ago, I was engaged to Dylan Reeves, an associate at your firm. I was also 6 weeks pregnant with his child. You could have heard a pin drop. Dylan Reeves used his corporate credit card, the one issued by Chen, Morrison and Associates, to pay for the abortion he pressured me into having. He used company resources to research clinics, made calls from his office phone to schedule the appointment, and put the procedure itself on his expense report under client entertainment. I pulled up the expense report on the screen behind me. There it was, plain as day. Dinner with client, $847 on the exact date of my abortion. Richard Chen was on his feet again. This is privileged financial information. How did you? I obtained it legally through a discovery request filed with the Bar Association, I said calmly. Which you would know if you'd bothered to read the subpoena that was served to your firm yesterday. The journalists were frantically taking notes now. The advocates were leaning forward, hanging on every word. The other senior partners were staring at Richard Chen, with expressions ranging from shock to fury. For 8 months, I continued, I stayed silent because Dylan Reeves convinced me that what happened was my fault. That I was the one who made poor choices. That I was the one who should be ashamed. I picked up the ultrasound pictures, holding them up for everyone to see. These are the only pictures I have of my baby. The baby Dylan Reeves made me abort, and then lied about, telling his own mother I'd had a miscarriage. I played Patricia's recording. Dylan's voice filled the room, his drunken confession damning him with every word. When it ended, I looked directly at Richard Chen. You've known Dylan Reeves since he was a child. You hired him straight out of law school. You fast-tracked him toward partnership. Tell me, Mr. Chen, did you know about his pattern of reproductive coercion? Did you know he's done this to at least 7 women that we're aware of? Or did you just not care as long as he kept bringing in clients and making the firm money? I will not be interrogated by, Richard began. But one of the other senior partners cut him off. Richard, sit down. Thomas Morrison, the Morrison in the firm's name, stood up. He was older, maybe 70, with steel gray hair, and the bearing of someone who'd seen everything. Miss Chen, on behalf of Chen, Morrison and Associates, I want to apologize. If what you're saying is true and I have no reason to doubt you, then we have failed in our ethical obligations not just to you, but to the legal profession itself. He turned to face Richard Chen. Richard, consider yourself on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct a full internal investigation. If we find evidence that you knowingly covered for Mr. Reeves' behavior, I'll ask for your resignation. Richard Chen's face went purple. You can't, I'm a founding partner. And I'm the senior founding partner, Morrison replied coldly. And unlike you, I still remember what it means to practice law with integrity. Security will escort you out. As security guards appeared to lead Richard Chen away, I caught his eye. There was hatred there, yes. But also something else. The dawning realization that he'd underestimated me, that they'd all underestimated me. After he was gone, I addressed the rest of the room. Tomorrow, I'll be holding a public press conference with several other women Dylan Reeves has harmed. We're going to tell our stories, all of them. But tonight, I wanted you, the people who work in positions of power, who have the authority to change things, to hear the truth first. I gathered my materials, preparing to leave, when Thomas Morrison approached me. Miss Chen, would you be willing to serve as a consultant to our firm? We're overhauling our ethics policies, and I think your perspective would be invaluable. I considered the offer. A year ago, I would have said no. Would have wanted nothing to do with the firm that had enabled Dylan. But now, I saw an opportunity. Yes, I said, but I have conditions. Full transparency on Dylan's cases and any other potential misconduct. Mandatory training on reproductive rights and coercion for all employees. And a fund established to support women who've experienced what I experienced. Legal fees, therapy, whatever they need. Morrison nodded. Done. All of it. As I left Sakura Garden that night, my phone exploded with notifications. The journalists had already filed their stories. Within an hour, every major news outlet in Seattle was running the headline. Law firm associate, accused of pattern of reproductive coercion. Senior partner placed on leave. But the story that mattered most came from a smaller outlet, a women's health blog that had been following my story from the beginning. Their headline read, From Victim to Victor. Victoria Chen's fight against reproductive coercion changes legal landscape. Rachel called as I was driving home. You did it, she said simply. You actually did it. We're not done yet, I replied. Tomorrow's the press conference. That's when everyone will see the ultrasounds. The next morning, I woke to find that Dylan had checked himself into a psychiatric facility. His lawyer released a statement claiming emotional breakdown due to false accusations and cyberbullying. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, nothing. He'd made his choices. Now he was living with them. The press conference was held at noon in the Washington Women's Legal Center, a room that could hold maybe 50 people. Over 200 showed up. They packed the room, spilled into the hallways, gathered outside with signs that read, Believe Women, and My Body, My Choice. Emma Patterson spoke first, her voice shaking but strong. She told her story, showed her medical records, explained how Dylan had isolated her from her support system before pressuring her into the abortion. 2 other women spoke next, each adding to the pattern, each piece of testimony more damning than the last. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium and pulled out the ultrasound pictures, holding them up to the cameras. This is my baby, I said. 6 weeks old when this picture was taken. 8 weeks old when Dylan Reeves paid for the abortion with his company credit card. And then went golfing. I heard gasps from the audience. I saw people crying, but I kept going. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing this because somewhere right now, there's a woman being pressured to make a choice she doesn't want to make. There's a woman being told her pregnancy is inconvenient, her body is a problem, Her future is less important than someone else's career. And I want that woman to know. You don't have to comply. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to protect the person hurting you. I placed the ultrasounds on the podium, my hands finally steady. Dylan Reeves took a lot from me. He took my trust, my sense of safety, my ability to believe in love. But most of all, he took my choice. And I'm here today to take back my voice. The room erupted in applause. The questions from journalists came rapid fire. How long had the abuse gone on? What did I want to happen to Dylan? Was I pursuing criminal charges? I answered every question honestly. Yes, I was pursuing charges. Reproductive coercion was a crime in Washington state. Yes, I wanted Dylan disbarred. Yes, I wanted laws strengthened to protect other women. But most importantly, I wanted people to understand that this wasn't just about one man's cruelty. It was about a system that enabled that cruelty, that protected powerful men at the expense of vulnerable women, that treated reproductive choices as career calculations instead of fundamental human rights. After the press conference, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 22, tears streaming down her face. My boyfriend has been pressuring me, she whispered. I'm 7 weeks along. He keeps saying we're not ready, that it's not the right time, that I'm being selfish. But I want to keep it. Your story, it made me realize I can say no. I gave her my card with all the resources I'd compiled. You can say no, I told her. And if he can't respect that, he doesn't deserve you or your baby. She hugged me tight and left. And I knew whatever happened next, whatever legal battles or public scrutiny awaited this moment made everything worth it. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Within a week, Dylan was officially disbarred pending completion of the ethics investigation. Richard Chen resigned from the firm rather than face his own misconduct hearing. The other women who'd come forward all filed civil suits against Dylan. Thomas Morrison made good on his promise. The firm established the Reproductive Rights Legal Defense Fund with an initial investment of $5 million. They hired 3 new ethics officers and implemented mandatory training on reproductive coercion, harassment, and abuse of power. The story went national. I did interviews with major networks, wrote an op-ed for the New York Times, and testified before the state legislature on a bill that would strengthen protections against reproductive coercion. But the moment that mattered most came 3 months later. I was at my gallery, hanging a new exhibition featuring work from female artists who'd survived abuse, when Patricia walked in. I have something for you, she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a check from Dylan, payment for the therapy I'd needed after the abortion, the legal fees I'd incurred, and a formal apology written in his own hand. The apology was surprisingly genuine. No excuses, no justifications, just acknowledgement of harm done, and a promise to spend the rest of his life trying to make amends. He's in intensive therapy, Patricia explained. Long-term. He's not practicing law anymore. And he's not dating. He's finally doing the work he should have done years ago. I looked at the check, over $100,000. Enough to cover everything and then some. I'm donating this to the fund at his old firm, I decided. Every penny. Let it help other women instead. Patricia smiled. I thought you might say that. You know, Victoria, I always wanted a daughter. Someone strong and principled and brave. I got a son instead. But then I got you. And even though things didn't work out with Dylan, I hope you'll still let me be part of your life. We hugged. And I realized that some families you're born into, and some you choose. Patricia had chosen me, just as I was choosing to let go of the bitterness and anger that had consumed me for so long. The following month, I received notification that the reproductive coercion bill had passed the state legislature, strengthened by testimony from over 30 women who'd experienced what I had. It would now be easier to prosecute, easier to prove, and harder for men like Dylan to escape consequences. Emma Patterson and I started a nonprofit together, providing resources and support for women facing reproductive coercion. We called it Choice Matters, and within 6 months, we'd helped over 200 women. Life moved forward. My gallery thrived. My art evolved less about pain now, more about resilience and transformation. I dated occasionally, though trust came slowly. That was okay. I was learning to be comfortable with slow. 1 year after the press conference, I received a letter from Dylan. It was short. Victoria, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you did, speaking up, holding me accountable, it saved me from becoming something irredeemable. I'm working with a therapist who specializes in male violence and coercive control. I'm volunteering at a women's shelter, learning to listen instead of control. It will never be enough to make up for what I did to you and the others, but I'm trying. Thank you for being brave enough to stop me, Dylan. I filed the letter away. Maybe someday I'd write back. Maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter anymore. Dylan Reeves' redemption wasn't my responsibility or my concern. What mattered was this: I'd found my voice. I'd told my truth. I'd helped other women find their own voices and truths. And somewhere in the process of destroying Dylan's life, I'd rebuilt my own into something stronger, something truer, something entirely mine. The ultrasound pictures were framed now, hanging in my apartment alongside the painting I'd done, The Woman Made of Shattered Glass. Together, they told a complete story: what I'd lost, and what I'd become because of that loss. On quiet evenings, I'd look at those pictures and imagine the life I might have had. A child who'd be walking now, talking, laughing, a future that had been stolen. But then I'd look around at the life I'd built instead: the nonprofit helping hundreds of women, the legal reforms protecting thousands more, the community of survivors who'd found strength in shared stories. And I'd realized that my baby's legacy wasn't in what might have been, but in what now was. I'd turned private pain into public change. I'd transformed victimhood into advocacy. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and used it to ensure it happened to fewer women in the future. That was my revenge. Not the public humiliation or the professional destruction or even the legal consequences, though all of those were satisfying in their own way. My real revenge was this: I survived. I spoke up. I made a difference. And Dylan Reeves would spend the rest of his life knowing that the woman he'd tried to silence became the voice that changed everything. 3 years after the abortion, I finally felt ready to let go of the last piece of grief I'd been carrying. I took the ultrasound pictures, the originals, not the framed copies, to a quiet beach outside Seattle. It was sunset, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost artificial in their beauty. I stood at the water's edge, holding those fragile pieces of paper, thinking about the future I'd imagined, and the one I'd created instead. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," I whispered to the images. "I'm sorry I let someone else decide your fate. But I promise you, your brief existence mattered. It changed everything. It changed me." I released the pictures into the water, watching as the waves gently carried them away. The images blurred and faded, becoming one with the ocean, transformed into something larger than themselves. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. Emma Patterson. Calling with news that our nonprofit had just received a major grant. Another woman saved. Another future protected. I answered with a smile, ready to talk about what came next. Because that was the thing about revenge: the best kind wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about building something better from the ruins they left behind. And I was just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.